when we're talking about the idea of moving from stage to stage, within our boys moving into manhood, what we've got to understand is that there's a way to go to manhood. And what's happening is our boys are not, at this current juncture, not going through the stages. And the reason is because they don't know what they are, and they don't know how to go through them. So what we want to do is to help us be able to help our boys. Okay, understand this. When we start talking about masculinity development, what we're talking about is how our boys have become boys, how boys become males, and how males become men. So it becomes critically important to understand this process. Now, so often when we start talking about masculine development, what happens is we get a misconception, and so we want to clear up some of those and hopefully help us to get a better understanding of what masculinity should look like, because what we are experiencing now is not masculinity. It's not masculinity. And because it's not masculinity, someone's calling. Hold on. Okay, we had to silence that. Sorry about that. So, here we go. So when we start talking about the development of our sons, of our boys, it becomes critical for us to understand what we call the development of, or the stages of masculinity development. Now, the first thing that we need to understand is that there's a celestial masculine. Now, celestial masculine is not a gender. It's the consciousness, it's the awareness and consciousness of the essence of masculine energy from a macro perspective. Okay? So it's important that we understand this from a masculine perspective. Okay? And not only it's masculine energy from a macro perspective, it applies to the function of masculinity or masculine inserted into the micro in the universal sphere. So it moves from becoming masculine, which has no gender, to what we call masculinity. Okay, that's important to understand. Okay, but so it becomes masculinity. Now, the function of masculine implements the following functionality: to insert, inject, initiate, pierce, and penetrate. That's what masculine does. It's not gender. It is functional, operational, not gender. It has not been gender assigned or received any design or any mission yet. None of it. It has not. It's to define the functionality of how masculine operates. Now, understand this is before it comes into the sphere in which we live. Before it comes into the atmosphere, in the earth atmosphere in which we live. Okay? It is thus if you, for lack of a better term, it's a spiritual principle. Masculine is a spiritual principle. A principle is something that is the foundation and the building block of everything that comes after it. So that whatever comes after it, its foundation has to come back to masculine. Okay, and it has to function and it has to operate masculine. And we already said what that is. It inserts, it injects, it initiates, it pierces, and it penetrates. That's the function of masculine. Again, for the last time, it is not a gender yet. Okay? It's not a gender yet. Okay, so once masculine enters into this atmosphere, in which we call the Earth's atmosphere, okay, masculine becomes what we call universal masculinity. Notice the change. It went from masculine to masculinity. And the reason is that it dropped the E and added the ITY is because ITY designates a degree or a science or a framework. Okay? It's here when gender assignment is given. Okay? Understanding and remembering what happens when we start looking at what masculine does. Remember what we talked about. It initiates, it pierces, it penetrates, all those things. Okay? So now universal masculinity begins with the design. It has a mission and an assignment of the masculine, but it's converted into masculinity within the Earth atmosphere or in this earthly sphere. So all boys are born with universal masculinity, which comes from the celestial masculine. Now, when we start talking about the characteristics of universal masculinity, we have to understand that it's managerial, it's directive, it's innate, and it's divinely inspired. Okay? Universal masculinity is uncovered by and through masculinity consciousness and awareness, which proceeds from with the boy through the celestial masculine in transition to this material and scientific world. Now, I know that may sound confusing, so let me just say it real simple. What happens is masculine comes into the earth realm and is transformed from masculine to masculinity, and it comes along with the boy from the celestial masculine realm. And when it comes attached to the boy and comes into this material and scientific world, the ITY operates and is manifested materially, but is functioned scientifically. Whereas it was before functional by principle, now it functions by scientific method. Everything operates in this realm under scientific method. Okay? So the baby, right? The baby comes into this world as a boy. Every baby when baby is born, is either blue or either pink, right? The colors that we use to identify. There's some people trying to do away with that. But the bottom line is a baby it's either born with blue or it's born with pink. Okay? So now, the next phase is once the boy comes into this atmosphere and puts on masculinity, right? And is born into this world. The next phase is that here's what it looks like. It's similar to a blank computer that needs to be uploaded with the proper type of uploads for it to function, the proper programming. So number 3 is what we call parental modeled masculinity. is boyhood. It's how a boy learns to be a boy. And this stage is where the major influences trigger the innate masculine design, mission, and assignment, and brings them into the boy's reach. Okay? So the design, the mission, and the assignment is brought into the boy's reach, but it is made manifest by the fact that the boy is learning certain aspects of boyhood, how to operate, how to understand his design, how to understand his mission and his assignment as a boy. Okay? And this is all done, throughout the boy's life through parental masculinity, which is the key that unlocks the door to masculinity attainment. So a boy needs to have someone provide the uploads so that he can function. So it's important that the boy begin to function properly by the things that he learns through the parental guidance. That's why a father is important to a boy. Why? A father is important to a boy because a boy needs masculinity. And masculinity can only come from said or like manner entity. Another masculine entity. Now, this is why a boy's father is important. Because the things that a boy needs to learn can only come from his father. It's not going to come from a baby daddy or a stepfather or a boyfriend or an uncle. It only can come from the father. And this is important that fathers need to understand the importance that you have in your son's life. Because you are the key that unlocks the door to masculinity attainment. You share with him how he's supposed to operate and function. Because as a boy, you show him how to go to the bathroom. You show him what type of toys are meant for boys and not meant for boys. You show him how boys think and talk. It's called parenting. That's why we call it parental model masculinity. Parental model masculinity. Because the parent models for the boy how he's to function. So it's important that the boy has his father to show him how to do the things that would cause him to escalate or move on to the next stage. He has to be able to move to the next stage. And he can only do that when he's properly trained and mentored and taught and discipled by his father on how a boy is and is not supposed to act and operate and to function. So once the boy matriculates and he gains everything that he's supposed to gain from his parents, he moves to the next stage, which is called environmental masculinity. Now, this stage of masculinity is largely dependent upon environmental, cultural, social, and educational influences. Now, these examples of acceptable environmental masculinity are determined by the following means: cognitive, mental, psychological, physiological, intellectual, chronological, and emotional development. So these developmental aspects are critical in all developmental phases. Okay, even in the other three that we've already mentioned, but they're very, very important, extremely important in this particular stage, the environmental masculine stage, because the environment plays such a critical role. This stage, it's critical because of its advanced development, sees and appreciates differences from the parental masculinity stage as well. So the difference between this phase and all those before it is that this can look back and see and appreciate the differences that it has from the parental, and the parental is the foundational. So it's important that the father teaches the son, because it will control the environmental masculinity. But if the son has not been properly parental model masculinity supplied, then the environment will dictate to him how he is to function and operate. And so that can be dangerous, because what happens is, in our community, culture, and clan, what we see now is we see influences that you as a parent say is not proper or appropriate. So if that's the case, then what we've got to understand is the importance of the environmental, the parental phase. The parental phase is the most important, because it's there that the boy, upon completion, becomes a male. No longer a boy. He's a male now. And it's because of the cognitive, the mental, the psychological, the physiological, the intellectual, the chronological, and the emotional development that this boy becomes a male. So it becomes critically important that we understand that this phase is very, very important. And this, once he completes this, he matriculates to what we call the masculinity man. See, now he moves from malehood to manhood. Malehood to manhood. See, we have a tendency to think that males are men, and they're not. They're not. If they have not finished the development, like we just talked about in the 8 areas I mentioned, if he has not developed in those areas, he cannot matriculate into manhood. But if he's fully developed, he knows, understands, and implements his individual purpose to transform his community, culture, and clan with the assistance of a properly selected femininity help or a wife. Right? The masculinity man is purpose-centered. See, purpose-centered means he knows what he's supposed to be doing here. And what does his help do? His help is his feminine side of purpose. See, there's a masculine and feminine purpose. And when you find the yin to your yang, okay, which means you find the femininity to your masculinity in your purpose, she is a perfect fit for you. She's a perfect fit. She already understands her purpose and knows her purpose, but she understands that her purpose is feminine. Remember with this, masculine inserts, injects, pierces, initiates, right? And penetrates. We talked about that. Now, that's what we do with our purpose from a spiritual and a cognitive perspective as it regards our femininity help. But she understands the feminine side of that, so there's not so much that you have to tell her, because she already knows. Which means that you don't have to tell her so a lot, because she already knows that she's the feminine side to your masculine. The masculinity man understands femininity and the role it plays in concert with masculinity. Okay, he understands it. He's also aware and cognizant of the transformation necessary within community, culture, and clan that can take place through the implementation of individual purpose. And lastly, he has the ability to identify and implement his legacy. He starts to understand the necessity of identifying and implementing, getting to implement legacy. And then what he does lastly, this is the last one, not that one, this is the last one. This is the last one, where he establishes succession selection. In other words, he begins to develop who's going to follow him. Okay. And once that's done, he moves to the last phase of manhood, which is masculinity, seniorship, or eldership. And in this particular phase, there's just two things that has to be done. One is legacy sustainability. In other words, he has to make sure his legacy is short, and to make sure, whereas last phase succession was selected, this one is where succession is